All right. Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Amy Nelson, and today I thought I would talk about the 3 doorways of elimination for estrogen. And this is actually going to dovetail very nicely into a class that I'm offering. It's a Zoom live class, and it's going to be next Friday, the 27th at 4 o'clock. And you can just go to my website and you can sign up for it. We'll do about an hour of, basically, the title of the class is Hormone Basics for the Menstruating Female. So I'm going to do like a 3-part class. One is for the menstruating female. The second class is actually the thyroid adrenal hormone axis, because that's an important concept. And then I'm going to do hormone basics for the menstruating female. And in each one of these classes, we really want to start to understand the method behind the symptoms. So we're going to go into our classic kind of issues that we face with hormones, especially heavy menstrual bleeding, acne, mood changes. And then, of course, as we get into menopause, we're going to talk about hot flashes and night sweats and low libido and all. We're going to look at it all from what it means, because I think that's valuable information for you so that you can kind of, instead of thinking you're broken, because you're not, you can start understanding yourself from what does the symptom mean? It's like your body's trying to text you and you're like, oh, a heavy menstrual bleeding or acne or even, constipation may mean I'm not eliminating my hormones very well. And that's something I got to pay attention to avoid bigger problems in the future. So it's kind of the concept of the class is to kind of help address that. So I'm really excited. So if you're not there live, it's totally okay. We're going to record it and it'll live forever on my website. So the idea is to just give a lot of information, because if you've ever had a visit with me, it's like getting a drink of water out of a fire hose. There's a lot of information, and I feel so sorry for people sometimes because, it's like being blasted with biochemistry, and I totally get it. Like, I've taken biochemistry, so I'm not going to say it's easy for me. I have to read it all the time. I was just reading the cytochrome P450 pathway again for the 1,000th time in my life. So it's one of those things you just have to keep coming back to. I always relate to it because, if I go to get my car's oil changed and they tell me you need this thing, I don't even know what the thing is. I have to call my brother. Or, I have to phone a friend. So it's okay to not know stuff, but it's equally okay to learn stuff too. So that's what I'm trying to help, because I know that your health, it's a thing. If you've got stuff going on, you do feel a little vulnerable, and that's a hard place to learn from. So what I'd like to do is make information just really okay, easy to learn. You can do hard things. I promise the biochemistry won't hurt. And you're free to ask questions. There's no dumb question. Oh my goodness. If you ever feel like that, then I think we need to make the environment safer for you to ask a question. That's actually pretty important in learning. And in your doctor's office visit too, you want to make sure that you are comfortable enough to ask questions, because it's your body and you have the right to do that. Anyway, so we could go on and on about that. But today, let's talk about how hormones, especially estrogen, are eliminated from the body, because that elimination process is kind of where problems start. So we're going to talk, we've touched on this a couple weeks ago when we talked about glucuronic acid and the idea of calcium D-glucarate, and then the metabolite beta-glucuronidase. Right? All those big words that have the root of it all is the gluc, G-L-U-C. So we were talking about bowel inflammation and how that messes up estrogen elimination. That's the last phase of estrogen elimination, which is phase 3, right? We're going to kind of skip around today. We're going to go to phase 1. Why didn't we start with that? I don't know. I was really excited about glucuronic acid that day. That's why we did phase 3. So now we're going to start at phase 1. And this is the pathway that estrogen meets first in the liver. And this is classically kind of categorized as the the cytochrome pathway. So cytochrome P enzymes are kind of like big enzyme families that do detoxification. I think that's the best way to say it. They're like super families that help you start your detox process. The idea of when we even say detox, what does that mean? Well, there's enzymes in the liver that try to break things down and get them ready to be water soluble to get out of the body. And you're going to excrete your hormones every time you have a bowel movement. You also excrete them through the urine. I guess I forget to say that a lot. I know we talk about the inflammation in the bowel being a problem for estrogen elimination, and that's true. You excrete your hormones in the urine as well. You excrete them both, both pathways. Where was I going with that? Oh, yes. So let's talk about, what happens in the liver with the cytochrome enzymes, right? First off, cytochrome enzymes actually, the way they're built is they use a heme group. Heme is the molecular configuration of how your body uses iron, right? And so iron, we know it classically because if people are anemic, if they're iron deficiency and anemic, they need iron. So iron, you mainly, in the blood supply, you're going to use it to transport oxygen to your tissue, right? Iron is going to be used in lots of different ways and lots of different biochemistry. So iron groups are actually needed for the cytochrome enzyme pathway. If you are anemic, how do you think that affects the liver? It affects it a lot. It's going to make it harder for the liver to do its job because it needs iron to start the cytochrome pathways for detoxification. So the enzymes made for detoxification use iron. And so if you're anemic, excuse me, that's going to happen. That's going to, impede that. So we think about that a little bit. So what does estrogen do? Well, it goes to that pathway. There are three main pathways that we talk about in phase 1. There's what's called the 2-hydroxy pathway, there's the 4-hydroxy pathway, and there's the 16-hydroxy pathway. So estrogen has to choose one of those 3 doors, okay? There's a favorite door. There's a better door than the rest of them. Door number 2, 2-hydroxy pathway, is the safest pathway for estrogen to go down. It means it's not going to get radicalized, or it's not, it's going to clear, with less stress on the body. It's going to clear most efficiently without having a potentized effect on the estrogen. So you can measure these. You can measure these in the urine, okay? When you're measuring all 3 of them, yes, you love to see the 2-hydroxy clearance pathway being utilized. And then, it converts on over to then phase 2. Phase 2 is all about neutralizing things and making it water soluble. Actually, think about the phase 1 pathway, we've got that hydroxy group. So that does make it a little bit, it kind of oxidizes the oxygen a little bit, right? So oxidization is kind of it's a little bit stressful, but it's prepping it to be water soluble. So it has to add that OH group, right? So here's where the tricky thing comes in. 4-hydroxy clearance pathway. The 4-hydroxy clearance pathway of estrogen is not a favored pathway. And in a lot of studies, it talks about the carcinogenic effect that it actually has on estrogen. So the 4-hydroxy pathway doesn't clear very well from the body. And especially if it goes on into then phase 2, where it's not cleared very well, and we can talk a lot about that next week. So if it goes into phase 2, it's not going to get cleared very well. It kind of stays around in the body. And then guess what it does to breast tissue? 4-hydroxy E1 and 4-hydroxy E2 have kind of what they call genotoxic, which is kind of a nicer way of saying carcinogenic, right? So we don't want to see that one being favored. Why would your body do that to you? Why would your body say, okay, I'm going to do this other clearance pathway? Well, okay, all these cytochrome pathways are used also for detoxing your alcohol intake, detoxing medications, certain drug metabolites. detoxing xenoestrogens, detoxing pesticides, herbicides, chemicals, all these kind of like environmental toxins. They're going to be used in that cytochrome pathway as well, and the body just might be having to make choices it doesn't want. It's like triaging choices that are not great, and so it's going to say, you know what, I need that pathway for detoxing alcohol and red dye 40 and tobacco, or just name the MSG. I name all the toxins you can think of. So they're going to be utilized in different ways. So that's the real story as the why the body would do that. So 4-hydroxy pathway is being preferred. You're going to study the oxidative stress that the liver is under. So let's say I have, you can test these metabolites like we're saying. So let's say we see that and we're like, we're going to start asking some questions about the toxic burden that the liver is under, right? Now, if you say, well, my liver is not inflamed because I did the complete metabolic panel, the COT metabolic, and the liver enzymes weren't elevated. There's 3 liver enzymes on a COT metabolic, and they're not really going to tell you that the liver is not in distress. Those pathways just tell you if the liver's inflamed or not, and the type of inflammation it's dealing with. Remember, your liver's got a lot of things it does, and so in a lot of ways that it's not working optimally. Those enzymes aren't to declare the liver healthy, right? If they're elevated, yeah, the liver's got some stuff going on, and you're going to try to understand that. But if they're fine, these are air quotes, fine, then yeah, they're not fine. Like, you can't declare the liver healthy just because those 3 enzyme pathways are normal. You can have full-on fatty liver and those enzyme pathways will be fine. So yeah. So anyway, the other pathway is the 16-hydroxy pathway. While it's not really like carcinogenic like the 4-hydroxy pathway, it is associated, the metabolite that it creates actually acts as estrogen in the body that stimulates probably more of a endometriosis pathway or fibroids. So when 16-hydroxy metabolites detected, you're going to start wondering if we have that estrogenic effect on the body, estrogen dominant, right? So that would mean like maybe somebody's got some endometriosis story. Somebody may have, uterine or breast fibroids. If we've got acne, if we've got a lot of heavy menstrual bleeding even. If we, mood changes are going to be associated with all the estrogen effects, and we can talk about that in its own setting almost. But you're going to start seeing like estrogen dominant features out of 16-OH, okay? So how do you fix this? So if you are trying to get the body to prefer the 4-hydroxy pathway, there's a couple really key components. We already mentioned one is to have iron, to not be anemic, and to understand if somebody's even got a low-grade anemia or a low-grade iron deficiency. Remember, you don't have to graduate into the pathology of anemia. You can watch your own trends go that way, and so it's okay to kind of like understand that. And in a woman, especially with heavy menstrual bleeding, iron deficiency anemia is quite common because she's out competing the intake of iron with the heavy menses, right? So yeah, that would kind of be something you want to correct. We've talked about this before too. The most absorbable iron supplement is iron bisglycinate, chelate, something like that. Iron stearate and iron oxides are going to constipate you. You would want to really kind of use an iron that's more absorbable. You need stomach acid to absorb iron, so that's a whole thing. You'll address all of that. Sometimes we even give a little ferritin with it all too. That ferritin you can measure ferritin as well. It's a measure of stored iron in the liver. So that's usually that's a quite useful tool. So you want to check on that if somebody's struggling with with estrogen dominance, with things like that. So you'll figure that piece out. Second is we're going to talk about diindolylmethane and indole 3-carbinol, and then the sulforaphanes. these are interesting. So DIM, diindolylmethane, helps the 2-hydroxy clearance pathway out. Indole 3-carbinol is kind of a precursor to DIM. It helps stabilize that pathway. Remember, when you use an active component and then you give a precursor, you help the body into steady state, meaning I just used this and more is coming, you know? So you'll see a lot of, oh gosh, I think these two are the ones that, oh, sorry. I just gave you a good shot of my forehead. Anyway, here's this. So it's probably backwards. This is Indolplex. And then here is another common thing that we'll use, diindolylmethane and indole 3-carbinol. And so these guys, yeah, Indolplex has been around forever. That's probably one that I've, used a lot. It, for the longest time, was the most cost effective. At the dose that is needed, I usually go for a good old 240 to 250 milligrams. Even, you know, at least 200 milligrams. A lot of studies vacillated between, like, you know, 225 to 240, stuff like that. So here, this indole 3-carbinol, or DIM IC3, it is, one capsule is 200 milligrams. So we might do 2 capsules of this or 2 capsules of this one. But if you get a product, and this is common, like, I really want you to know about this stuff, because a lot of times a manufacturer will know that you recognize DIM, but they won't know that they'll rely on the fact that you don't know the milligram dose. So if you're getting a DIM product and it's like 50 milligrams, and you're like, wow, it was so cheap. Yeah, that's why. Because you have to take 5 of them a day, you know, to have a therapeutic effect. So it's very important to kind of understand the milligram dose that we're going for, because that's a very, very common thing with a lot of supplements, is that you won't have almost what we call a therapeutic dose with it. So yeah, so at least 200 milligrams, you know, on upwards, you know, like, can you take too much of this? That's a hard thing to do. There's not going to be a level of toxicity with it, but that stated, we don't really go over 300 milligrams of diindolylmethane. By the time, if you're doing that amount and things aren't moving right, it's a different pathway. It's not that pathway. So it's not more is more, just take more and you'll be happy. But it's to kind of like figure out what pathway is actually, like, you know, the appropriate one to address. Sulforaphane. So sulforaphane, I kind of mentioned these 3 together because they're kind of a group that comes from cruciferous vegetables. So like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, kale, cabbage. Who else? Is radish one? I think radish might be one. I'll have to go look. So the all of those guys, diindolylmethane, IC3, and the sulforaphanes belong to that family. So a lot of times for a woman, we might stabilize her with supplements for a few months to make sure symptoms resolve and go to normal. And then we try to say, hey, I'd like you to eat vegetables like these, you know? But guess what? So if somebody's like, oh my gosh, I eat those things and I am so bloated. Aha. That's a little, you know, that's an interesting thing, because it's probably then there's some flora dysbiosis in the bowel, right? And so we'll hunt down any kind of bacteria overgrowths that is going on. You do want to stabilize bowel inflammation, and this gets into the SIBO talk pretty quickly. So when we do something like low FODMAP, which is a diet that is key in stabilizing SIBO, eventually you want to get back to eating those things. The problem is to be on low FODMAP for years. Really, it's not meant that way. You know, like, these are super important foods for the liver and your estrogen detox pathways. So if we wanted to, we really should stabilize the bowel, stabilize the flora, reintroduce those foods. And then if we have like gas and bloating and stuff, what do we know? It's the flora is not right yet. We have more projects to do. It can be, it can be easy to stabilize the flora, but in some people it's really hard. Yeah, I wished, like, I wished it was easy for some people, but sometimes it's been a long haul. And why is that? Probably because, you know, I think that the bacteria just gets embedded in the tissue. It throws a biofilm around itself. It's way more complicated. And we try our hardest with lots of different ways to stabilize the bowel, but it is a chore. It's a chore. I also always think we're under the competition of an inflammatory universe, right? So our diet and that kind of thing we may not get the message to ourselves. Oh, I didn't drink that much. Oh, I didn't have that much gluten. I didn't have that much sugar. And samesies, right? Like I do it too. I go, well, I didn't eat that much. And then my body tells a different story, right? So it is hard to kind of come to terms with what's going on, and maybe, you know, going into kind of a more guided situation with nutrition is useful. I know I've had to do that too. And I help people do this, but for my own body, same. Like I you know, I don't try to judge people for not keeping a strict diet, because I don't either at times. And I also think that, you know, you have to get into the behavior with nutrition too, and you have to make sure somebody's not having some sort of disordered eating process with it all. So you come to nutrition changes understanding human behavior quite a bit. That said, if somebody's got SIBO and they've eliminated all these wonderful brassicas, you want to fix that problem. As big of a problem as it is, you want to fix it. If somebody stays on low FODMAP diet forever, that's malnourishment. You know, that's going to be a problem. So, and you guys know me, there's key foods that I'm always harping on, you know, gluten and dairy all day long. Every time I turn around, those guys are really elevated, but I don't feel like they're key foods that add to the support of a key detox process in your body, you know. So they I feel like they're not like that. I feel like they come from inflammatory situations that have evolved to be the way they are, you know, and that's another good talk for another good time. So anyway, diindolylmethane, indole 3-carbinol, the sulforaphanes, they are things that help that 2-hydroxyclearance pathway out. The other one is good old quercetin. Love my quercetin. Oh my goodness. Quercetin, you probably have seen it around, and let me turn around without bonking, without hitting you with my head. So the one I use is this guy. This is that Repair Guard. Probably like the best quercetin I found is in this. Now remember, quercetin is a proteolytic enzyme, and it does come in a form called quercetin dihydrate. That dihydrate changes its solubility, and that would be useful in a situation like this. If you're trying to support 2-hydroxyclearance pathway, you're going to want to use that one. Quercetin itself, probably in cheaper forms, is, I think even Now brand has quercetin. I think you could just try it and see how it feels. Most of the time you're going to have relief of pain. Like quercetin's one of my favorite pain relievers. I use it a ton for somebody who's trying to get off dangerous pain medications, you know, and while still be out of pain. Quercetin helps with cell turnover. In this, it's just going to help support the proper clearance pathway. The other one that we know about too, a nutrient to support 2-hydroxy, is C3 complex, which is a turmeric curcumoids, right? So C3 complex and quercetin dihydrate, and then you've got diindolylmethane, indole 3-carbinol, and the sulforaphanes, right? All of those guys help us really push the 2-hydroxy clearance pathway. So you can do a lot of help for somebody in that sense. Should we just all be taking that? Well, I mean, I don't think you always need to be taking supplements. We want to actually use supplements as training wheels and then get to kind of a healthier habit. But you could monitor yourself. Like usually hormones are a 30-day cycle. In a menstruating female, you're definitely going to be monitoring your period, which is kind of why it's good to have a period. I know I've had this conversation with friends and family before where I think we as women, we just get really tired of it all. We just wish our period would go away. And why do we have to deal with it? And oh, can I just take a medication so I don't have my period? That sounds awesome. I get it, that it sounds tempting, but your menstrual cycle tells you if things are working right, you know, and if estrogen's in balance or not. So, well, I totally understand where that comes from. It's probably really useful to know, you know, if you had a heavy period or something was painful, that's your first sign that something's going on with my body's ability to get rid of estrogen in an appropriate way. And if I can fix that now, then I can try to avoid my breast cancer later. You know, that's actually the mentality that we kind of want to know. Same thing with acne, right? So acne, we're going to support estrogen's clearance, right? And if somebody's got cystic acne, hormonal acne, that's a liver problem. And your real concern is, hey, is estrogen going down that 4-hydroxy pathway? Because if it is, that's bad news bears, and I really want to minimize that so I can reduce risks for breast cancer later. So helping somebody sort out the root cause is really preventing something going on later. That said, I get palliation. Like I get, oh, I just want to have clear skin because I'm uncomfortable this way. Absolutely. You can palliate that. I totally get it. But you can't forget the problem was there. That's the deal with palliation. Palliation just means I'm taking away the symptom. I'm not really working on healing or understanding why the problem is there. So you want to do those two things majorly. You can't just be like, oh, my acne's gone because I take this thing. You know, it doesn't mean your hormones are still out of balance. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to talk about today. I think next time let's talk about that phase 2. So remember, we got phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And so today, the cytochrome pathway, 4-hydroxy, 2-hydroxy, 16-hydroxy. 2-hydroxy is our favorite, 4-hydroxy is our least favorite. 16-hydroxy is estrogenic. So that's just what they mean. So helping the body out by, you know, getting things through that 4-hydroxy pathway. Eat as much cruciferous vegetables as you possibly can. I think cook them. Oh, the big question you're going to get with cruciferous vegetables is the goitrogens, right? So that's you eat too much cruciferous vegetable, it can cause a goiter in the thyroid. That's if they're raw, right? And I do think the amount has to be pretty high. Like I think it's like 14 cups or something really high. Don't quote me on that. But when you cook cruciferous vegetables, then it deactivates the goitrogen activity. So that's pretty easy to remedy, you know. Yeah, look out for my class next Friday at 4 o'clock. And then if you can't make it on Zoom, this is a Zoom class, then it'll always be available for, you know, just to listen to, and you get the slides and my notes and any handouts I come out with. Hope you guys have a great day. That's all I have for today. And we'll just kind of go from there. And yeah, we'll see you next week. So, all right, have a good one.